Hi, and welcome to VIBEZ Daily. This is a daily devotional curated by VIBEZ Church to help you practice the way of Jesus and be all that God has called you to be. You have joined us for our year-long series titled Devoted. Acts 2:42 tells us that the followers of Jesus were devoted to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to breaking of bread, and to prayer. This podcast was created to provide context and commentary for what you read each day. Just before our friends begin discussing today's reading, we want to invite you not only for fellowship, but for prayer as well. We have created the Vibe Daily Chat group to offer you fellowship and a community where you can state your observations, ask questions about the reading or the podcast. You can join us by downloading the VIBEZ Church app in your favorite app store. Click Join the Conversation and join us today. And finally, we hope that you can join us for prayer. Prayer happens Monday through Friday, and more information on that can be found on the VIBEZ Church app under prayer. Now, let's begin our conversation on today's reading.
Yo, welcome to the VIBEZ Daily podcast. It is day 123. Here on our Devoted series, we have been journeying through the entire Bible this year, started in Genesis, now in First Chronicles, almost to the end of First Chronicles here, as we continue in chapter 24, right? I believe we pick up here today, and so really excited to be back again with my wife Victoria as we wrap up the book here over these next 2 days. Left off yesterday with David really taking time to prepare Solomon and the people of Israel, first with resources for the temple that they were going to build for God, but also with like instructions of just kind of how to maintain and serve and minister and keep up that temple, specifically with some emphasis on the Levites, right, and their roles. So talk a little about kind of just the those families in the lineage in 23, but we pick up here in 24 and starts to kind of bring some order to those different families and how they will serve. What do you think was interesting here in 24? Because it's really pretty much our whole day, 24, 25, and 26. We'll cover kind of some of the roles of these Levites. What you find was interesting, particularly in how they were organized?
Yeah, I think the first things that kind of stuck out to me was like the fact that like overall in general, the way that they even went about assigning some of these things was casting of lots. And I know this was probably like mentioned even just like in the conclusional way in chapter 25 verse 8, and it was like, and they cast lots for their duties, small and great, teacher and pupil alike. And so it's kind of like for all of these things that we're seeing, you'll see it here and there that they've casted lots. And so like on verse 7 of chapter 24, like the first lot fell on so and so, and the second lot fell on so and so, which once again I think we mentioned before, like how crazy it is that like this thing really works. Like this is what something the Lord had asked him to do. He's like, I'm not going to speak to you face to face like I do my servant Moses. But you guys are going to cast lots. They use the Urim and Thummim. The priests are going to use those to like figure out my will. And so in this instance, they're using this lot system and they're assigning people.
It feels like a lottery. It feels like it's by chance. But for them, it was like you said, it was ordained. It's not by accident, which I mean, candidly, is something I live by. Like, I already believe in coincidence. I don't believe in chance. It's hard to believe in a sovereign God, a God who is in control of all, who does what he wants, right? Or a providential God, which just essentially means a God that has a plan, right? Kind of for everything. To me, it's hard to believe in a God who is both sovereign and providential, who is in control and has a plan, and still believe that things can be left to chance. And like by accident. And so, like just to think that like even the rolling of a die is not by chance. Like we see it as chance because we don't know what it will, the outcome will be. But like it's predetermined and determined by him. in a lot of ways. So yeah, I don't know. I just thought I agree with you. It seems so interesting that that's the way that they make assignments, but it worked.
Yeah.
Right? It worked for them specifically. Um,
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So I mean, you kind of pointed out 24, just the order of this, right? Kind of the first lot and third, and they kind of keep going through until there were 24 total, right? And then they have kind of the rest of these duties kind of get split among some of the rest of the Levites and whatnot. But yeah, anything else, 24 is not a whole lot there as far as like content. But anything else that you thought was interesting before we kind of get into some of the musicians in 25?
Yeah, I think I highlighted something in like verse 6 that stuck out to me.
Okay.
It's like the mentioning of this scribe Shemaiah, and I think it's just like, number one, just wow, David was organizing these people, right, for the sake of the temple that he wouldn't even get to see. But two, that we even see that like we have a scribe here that is recording all of these things. So like one of the things we said was like, wow, all these names, somebody wrote these down, somebody did something. Well, in this case, it was Shemaiah. Like he was a scribe who was, as they were doing these lots, and he was like the secretary on duty, like writing this stuff down. The fact that even his name was included in this, it just gives like the depth to like this was really a people who really had an order and like were really doing these things. Like some of these details are just like not left out here on like who was doing what. And so I think it's just really interesting to see that insight of like seeing the name of one of these scribes who was charged with this duty to write these names down.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And I think it's all the more impressive to consider that like this also withstood their exile, right? Like, because again, this is all before exile, but it's being written after, right? So to say that like, despite the fact that they have been, taken to Babylon, because to your point, like this is new stuff, right? So this is not even just like I picked up the scrolls of Samuel or I picked up the Kings and just copied what they said. Like, this is some new information in the way that it was like organized and some of this stuff is not written in that. And so the fact though that there was this account that was meticulously kept and preserved despite the fact that they were taken from their land is so impressive to me. Like
It is.
That's such a big deal.
Somebody was guarding this with their life.
Like God. But yes. Like, but just sincerely, because I mean, think about it, man. Like, particularly historically, the first thing that people would do when they would conquer a land is essentially destroy any evidence of your existence in your history.
Yeah.
Right? Like, just burn everything down. You know, like
all the libraries.
Yeah, burn the libraries, burn the temple. Right? This is some of what we know happens to their temple.
Yeah.
Yet somehow, their history stayed. And again, I don't know if we give enough just like attention to how the history of the Jewish people and ultimately the Christians, right, has been preserved over time.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
And you can tell, like, it's not like he just came and just like, well, I gotta make something up and write down some names. Like, a lot of these names and who we see in the order in which they've come, and even through in some of these other books, like even their names and showing that they were serving in this certain role, like they align. Like some of these names that were mentioned, you know, back in the Pentateuch in the first 5 books, right? Like, are the same names that we say here, and some of the roles and the priests and the Levites that we see back in Moses' day, or some of the same ones that we see here, and then we just see more because more descendants have come at this point. And so
Yeah.
I think it's just beautiful that like throughout, like this really is a history book, like you said, but like throughout time, it's just layers that have just been added to it. And that the fact that like these are the same names, it's not like we've just made up something years later.
Yeah, because he said it's not that's a good distinction, like a reminder that this is not one book but more a library of books.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's not technically that like Chronicles is building off of Kings, which is building off of Samuel, which is building off of, you know what I mean, Judges and whatnot. Like this is not, these are multiple different authors, right? Like the Pentateuch, first 5 books are written by somebody completely different than Joshua's written, or Judges is written, or Samuel's written, or Kings is written, or Chronicles is written. Like these are all different authors.
Yeah.
And so as you said, to have stuff align shows that either it's being referred to, or you know, there was these accounts. And either way though, again, it's significant. It's just significant that it lasted that long. Like this is not 2024 where stuff can just live in the cloud and I just saved it in storage. You know what I'm saying?
Thank
like,
the Lord for the cloud though.
Yo, I'm so grateful for it, because if it were on paper, I would lose it.
It's gone.
There's so many. I have a file thing up there, and I don't know where half the stuff is that's on paper. Like, I get to the register, I'm like, please text me my receipt.
Please.
Email it to me.
Every
something.
time.
I don't want a printed receipt. I'm going to lose it.
Yeah, it's already lost before I got to the car.
Yeah, I got it. I please email it to me. Text it to me. Because, and again, but for them, I'm like, I can't even keep track of a receipt, man. I can't even, I barely know what my birth certificate is half the time, or my social security card. You know what I'm saying?
Lord,
like, I barely know where that is. They kept an entire historical record of generations of people. In a time when they couldn't just Xerox it and copy it and or upload it and scan it to Adobe, and like they couldn't do that. They had
that's probably why though they took such good care, because it was like, this is the one we got.
This is our only copy. So
it'll take us 3 years to copy this.
Yeah. But even if like that, but just as long as it takes to copy though, it only takes this long for it to disappear.
You right.
It only takes this long for somebody to set it fire.
You right.
It'd be gone. So like, and they can't get it back. Like I said, you can't just take it out the trash.
Nope.
You know, restore.
That's right.
Whatever. So like, as much as, yes, you're right, they probably cared for it greater. It also meant it would take very little effort to just delete all of their history. Like, that mess is crazy to me.
It would.
As you said. So quick detour there, but so we get those in 24. In 25 specifically, kind of deal with musicians more than kind of some of the other roles specifically. So this goes back to Asaph again. So we kind of talked about him. We are introduced to him a little earlier. He writes a lot of the Psalms, but he and some others, some of his sons, like, they were equipped, man, with like lyres and harps and cymbals. But I think the thing that jumped out to me was they was also equipped to prophesy.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. In verse 2 and 1.
Yeah. Verse 1. So yeah, my version says that who were to prophesy, accompanied by lyres, harps, and cymbals.
I didn't catch that. That's good.
Yeah, like that was almost like essentially their role, which again, to be reminded, to prophesy, to speak on behalf of the Lord, right? To say what God would want them to say. We often in modern day kind of see prophecy as like fortune telling the future. Oftentimes, prophets did predict what would come, because that's often what God wanted people to know. It's like what was going to come.
Yeah,
but that was not the prophet's primary role. Like if you think about even Nathan, going back to the story that was scrubbed from Chronicles, like his job was to tell David, you were wrong for what you just did. Right? This is the message the Lord gives you. You're wrong for what you just did. And so like it's to speak on behalf of God, but like I just love that it's through their music. I don't know, that was so interesting to me
deep.
because we will read Psalms and when we get to that, there's so much prophecy in Psalms.
Yeah, there is.
There's so much just declaring of what's coming and who God is and what Jesus will be like. And
also how we should live and remembering who God is. Yeah. And reminding the people of this, reminding people of your destruction, but then encouraging the people of who the Lord is.
Yeah. I don't know. I just find it interesting. Like I've never thought of the Levitical musicians as prophets until kind of reading it through this passage.
And now that you said that, now all of a sudden verse 5 is sticking out to me. That all these were sons of Heman, the king's seer, which is another word for like prophet. Yep. Or like person of, Samuel was considered a seer, right? Like the current day prophet. Yep. So so it's like sons of the prophets here too. Wow.
Yeah, so like I said, that was very interesting to me. We get just this idea of them as prophets, particularly in relation to music specifically. Because I have known Psalms to be prophecies, right? In some ways, like that's kind of some of what is. Yeah, I just have known of it because even when you think about prophecies of Jesus specifically, many of them come from the Psalms. I just don't know if I've ever realized that it was kind of just their role. That was what they were gifted to do specifically. So we kind of get the rest of 25, just again back to you're talking about these lots, right? So some of their duties are decided by casting lots. And you have like Asaph's sons and others of his family that kind of get all these, again, 24 specifically roles, which I think 24 is significant. I don't know if you pay attention kind of to the fact that there was these different sections. It was known, or I know it to be that like the way that the Levites served was essentially like a month a year was kind of the rotation. And so you were like all on for a month and off for 11. And so like the 24 just obviously divided by 2 is 12. Like they were they would often just like serve for a month out of the year and then be off the last 11. And so the 24 are just for that coverage, right? Like two per month that are there serving, and then they'd rotate out and kind of the next group would come in. And so I don't know, I just thought it was interesting that like you see that in both here. You'll see it, you saw it again before with the role of the Levites in the temple. We'll see it with the gatekeepers a little bit later, that there were often these divisions in that rotation. But we have these gatekeepers that are in chapter 26. They come from the Korathites specifically. You see your man, I don't know if you noticed, your guy shows up here in 26. Obed-Edom is here, so as you mentioned before, so we can check that off. Obed-Edom and the Korathites are Levites. They're part of that. They're just a family within the clan of or the tribe of Levi. Anything else you thought was interesting here in 26?
I think it was interesting because sometimes we hear about the treasury and stuff like that. So I'm sorry, I know we were at gatekeepers. I'm kind of skipping down to like verse 20. There's even like the treasury, like just to see the names of the people who are over this, because we hear like, and the goal was putting the treasuries, and the treasury was raided, and and we hear about the treasuries. But then like it was interesting for me to read this and see, these are the specific people who were in charge of protecting the treasury. And as much as I would think that like, this should have been like, warriors. Yeah. No, well, we know that the priests and Levites, they got down too. Yeah. And oftentimes they had shields and swords as well. But he said that the fact that this was, governed and like watched over by the Levites was interesting to me.
Yeah. Which is probably just calls out like one of the biggest things that like I noticed, not just reading this, but we've talked about it before, is just, as you said, the various roles that Levites played. Like, I think growing up in my church context, I've often heard the musicians referred to as Levites, like in church, like we'd often call the musicians Levites. I feel like we're selling Levites short.
Yeah.
Like, yes, the musicians, that is one of their roles, right? As we saw, or for Levites was to be a musician. But candidly, man, I mean, Levites, as you said, they were guards. They were guarding the temples, the treasuries. They was guarding the gates.
They went out to battle.
I mean, we saw before, right? They are butchers, right? They got to slaughter all these animals and offer these sacrifices. At one point, they were the doctors.
Yeah,
they were judges. I mean, there was all sorts of roles that Levites had to play to serve, in God. And I think, like, I don't know, it is, to me, pretty applicable because, like, it does reflect a lot of what working in the church looks like, and working for the church or on behalf of the church. That, like, yeah, if you think that the only, like, role in the church is to, like, preach and teach and play music, like, you missing it. There's a lot of stuff, man, that the people that, like, literally that was their whole life was dedicated to serving the Lord. There's a lot of stuff they had to do.
You're right.
That had nothing to do with preaching, teaching, and worshiping. You know what I'm saying?
And you lived a lot of that life. Painting walls. You ended up being tech.
I did.
And sound. And
I did.
Editing. And
yes, there's definitely a lot more to it. Shout out to those vocational full-time staff members at churches all across this country. But but I even just mean that more so in like I'm not even talking about vocationally, just like, yeah, man, you can serve the Lord in so many ways, man.
Yeah, you sure can.
And don't think because I don't have a spiritual gift, quote unquote, that you don't have nothing to offer the church.
Yeah.
Like,
because you do have a spiritual gift, and it just look different than what.
Join the security team. You know what I'm saying? And like the Levites guard the treasury, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, do something. Be a gatekeeper. Just stand watch.
Yeah.
and pray for people, right? I don't know. There's just so many things that we can do that don't necessarily require being a talented musician or a prophet or a speaker on behalf of the Lord. Like, I don't know. That's just something that just jumped out to me.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. Anything else here in 26? So you said you brought out the treasurers as a card. Them talked a little bit about this gatekeeper role. They were kind of on different sides, right? Station watch. A few of them each day. Anything in particular?
Yeah, I think this last section kind of jumped out to me though.
Okay.
Well, it was kind of like in verse 31. It was like, in the 14th year of David's reign, search was made, and men of great ability among them were found at Jazer and Gilead. And like David was appointing certain peoples to be like heads of fathers of houses and oversight and all that. I think it's just interesting. And this was in the context of like finding judges and officers and people to rule even on the other side of the Jordan and stuff. And so it was interesting.
Yeah, no, that's good. Like I said, it just goes back to getting some additional roles.
Yeah.
But it reminds me again back to Moses and like Jethro giving him kind of that instruction of like, yeah, you can't govern all these people by yourself, man. Like, establish some people that'll be able to judge some of those minor things on your behalf. And you kind of see David doing a similar thing, establishing those judges or governors or whatever word you want to use in those different communities. So
yeah, that's all.
Okay. But yeah, again, those are the Levitical roles. Is kind of what we get in the 3 chapters we read today. And a lot of those, again, just very interesting, but seeing kind of context for how, again, David is preparing for his departure, and we'll see that tomorrow. Like, he knows he's dying, and he's kind of giving some final stuff here to make sure that they're all set, that Solomon is set with what he needs, with resources, with instructions, with structure, with all of that. And so, yeah, we'll pick up at chapter 27 as we kind of round out some of those roles, and then 28 and 29, kind of some last words from David before we bring First Chronicles to a conclusion. But appreciate you guys joining us today. Again, hope this was beneficial for you all. Look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow as we end First Chronicles. Take care.
Thank you for joining us for the VIBEZ Daily podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, or download our favorite, the VIBEZ Church app. Visit vibes.church/devoted for additional episodes, notes, details, and the latest merch. Join us next time as we continue our journey through the Bible. Take good care.